Hi, thank you for choosing to log in and select training in regards to legally authorized representatives, also referred to as LARs. This is part of our informed consent process series. This is a very important topic. As I go through the next slides, I'll be talking about certain aspects of this PowerPoint, but please be sure to pause the video to read all of the information on each slide. And also, you are more than welcome to request a copy of this PowerPoint from our office if you have any questions. And I will be happy to also provide in services to teams or answer any questions if any come up. And so, as we navigate into this, the first thing we need to talk about is the crucial aspect of the research process, which is IRB approval for vulnerable populations. When we're working with participants who may have cognitive impairment or limited decision making capacity, the IRB needs to give special approval for that. This is something really important to remember. You and your team need to have a solid plan in place for those participants who might regain their decision making capacity. You will need to either have a plan to reassess them and also to gain their consent again if their situations change. So from the beginning, this is not a process that can be set and forgotten about. This is a process to where you need to have a plan for how to gain consent for cognitive impairment, and then afterwards, if their situation changes, how do you reassess and you gain it again? And so, as we talk about capacity for consent, let's talk about how we actually assess someone's capacity to consent. Every study needs a clear recruitment plan that spells out how this is going to be handled. Think of it as your roadmap. It needs to show exactly who needs to be assessed and how you will do that. The IRB with your research team will be looking at several factors for this. Some of them is, what are the risks involved in your study? What benefits might the participant see? How complex is your study? Do you have access to legally authorized representatives? What are the specific characteristics for your patient population? And also, don't forget, you have to document everything. For Carillion specific requirements, you will find all of the details on our website that I've also provided there on this slide. But again, it's just good that the understanding that it's the IRB along with your research team that reviews and assess this. So let's just step back for a minute and be on the same page of what exactly a legally authorized representative is. The federal regulations define this as someone who's legally authorized to consent on behalf of our potential participant. In Virginia, we have specific laws about this. It lays out exactly who can serve as a LAR. Something crucial to remember about this is when it comes to non therapeutic research, an LAR can only consent if the IRB determines the risk is minimal or just slightly above minimal. So, that is a very important note to consider. Still talking about Virginia laws, the Virginia laws gives us very specific hierarchy for who can serve as an LAR for adult participants. To walk you through this order, the first choice is always the agent that is appointed under an advance directive. Okay. Number two, after that, is the legal guardian. Number three, which is next in line, is their spouse, unless they're in the process of a divorce. Four would be the adult child. Then, after that, is a parent of the adult subject, followed by an adult sibling. And then finally, we could consider any other person or body legally authorized to consent for that potential participant. This order is not optional. It needs to be followed exactly as specified. So, the fundamental principle we want to look at with every participant is that every person is presumed to have capacity unless we specifically determine otherwise. This isn't just a nice idea, it is fundamental to the ethical medical practice. Okay? And so, for an LAR to step in, we need to establish that the potential participant truly cannot make an informed decision. This means they either can't understand what the research involves or its consequences, or they can't rationally evaluate the risk and benefits. That is something so important to consider because, again, we want to make sure that everyone's given that voluntary informed consent. When it comes to documenting incapacity, there are two scenarios that we've kind of laid out in all of our guidance documents. The first scenario is if the potential research subject is unconscious or has a profound impairment of consciousness, maybe from a trauma or a stroke, and I've specified others on this slide. I'm looking at the top paragraph. But in that situation, we would need one physician caring for them to document their incapacity. Okay, so that is a very specific, profound impairment that we have specified here. In all other cases of incapacity, we would have to have two professional opinions on the patient's incapacity. One would be from their treating physician, and another would be from a second physician or clinical psychologist who isn't involved in the patient's care. This is part of our checks and balances system, and I will get into this more specifically when I show you the LAR consent form. But again, these are the two scenarios we look at for subject incapacity. So there are some absolute boundaries we have to respect when we are working with LARs. They cannot consent if the research conflicts with the participant's religious beliefs or basic values, the participant objects to participating, and we have two or more LARs of equal priority who disagree. It is also important to remember that are restrictions about non-specific research. Okay, I mentioned this earlier, but the IRB has to specifically determine that it presents no more than minor increase over minimal risk if it is considered non-therapeutic research. So again, these are the absolute hard boundaries that has to be followed with LARs. For the IRB to approve LAR consent, they need to see several things clearly laid out in your study submissions and the documents. I have them listed here as bullet points. These are very, very important. So this may be a moment you may want to pause the video to go through these yourself. But, think of these as your checklist to prepare for the IRB approval. Regarding assent, we can talk about that more specifically, and you'll see it on the consent template I'm going to show you momentarily. But it provides documentation and also supporting information about how basically to approach assent and how assent matters in the LAR process. So let's talk about what happens when a participant's decision-making capacity changes. If they regain capacity, we need to go back and get their own consent to continue. And if they say no, we respect that and we withdraw them from the study. If capacity decreases after they've joined the study, then the LAR becomes responsible for medical decisions. While we don't need new written consent from the LAR, they need to be fully informed about the study, and they can withdraw the participant if they believe it is in their best interest, as in the participant's best interest. Okay? So at this point, I would like to show you the LAR template because a lot of the stuff we have talked about I want to show you how the template guide that we have created and provided guide you through these steps. Okay, so what I have on your screen right now and I'm displaying is this is our LAR consent template. It provides guidance and helps you walk through the process that I just went over in the PowerPoint. I'm going to slowly zoom in, but I wanted to show you an overview because this is 5 steps. And so it's about 4 pages and it helps you through the consent process for LARs and provides more details and instructions of what to do. And so at the top, you'll see that instructions are highlighted in yellow. Step 1 deals with the categories, and I referred to them as scenarios during the PowerPoint. This is where you determine the incapacity of the research subject. And so, category 1 is where they are unconscious or experiencing a profound impairment of consciousness. And so, it's specified such as trauma, stroke, or an acute physiological condition. They would be under category 1. Category 2 is where I discussed you would have to have 2 physicians to sign off on their incapacity to make decisions. These categories have been determined by Virginia state law. And so this document was drafted by our office and legal because these are the categories that Virginia specifies. It's also important to note that these categories can only be signed off by physicians. A physician's assistant or nurse practitioner cannot sign off on which category a research participant may fall under. You'll notice that the boxes for signature, the first one is if it is for category 1. If it is for category 1, again, it is signed off by the research participant's treating physician. They would just need to sign this box and you can move forward to step number 2. If the research participant falls into category number 2, then both the boxes, box 1 and box 2 would have to have signatures. The first box again would be the treating physician caring for the patient. And again, box 2 would be a physician or a clinical psychologist not involved in the treatment of the patient. And so again, it's 2, and the consent template does provide you with direct guidance on how to follow along with this. So as we step forward to 2, this is the section to where the IRB approved research team member will complete this section prior to enrollment. And so this is where you are identifying the LAR. You'll notice that on the first box you can check, this is if they have an advance directive, and you would need to place a copy of the advance directive in the research file. That is just something important to note. The rest have very good details, and this is where you check to have the correct relationship of the LAR to the research subject. Down here provides you more specific information, and then the research team member would print and sign their name. The step 3 is focused on the LAR. And so this is where you make sure that they are fully aware and comprehend what is involved in the study, and that the participant is unable to give the informed consent. And so they are representing them as the LAR. And this is where you not only get the LAR's printed name and their signature, but you would print the name of the research participant as well. And this needs to be dated. So then you move on to step 4, and step 4 is where the person obtaining the LAR consent would print their name and sign there. So again, this is the person who is specified on the IRB approved recruitment and enrollment during the informed consent process. This is where that person would print and sign their name that they have followed the steps and are accurately following the informed consent process with the LAR. This next box is for the assent process. The assent process is very similar to like if a child was participating in research. It is our job to always give the person who is going to be the research subject the opportunity to provide assent. So this actually can even be determined, or the research team member can talk to the treating physician to where you determine if the adult participating in your study can provide assent. Obviously, in category one, that person would most likely not be able to provide assent, but category two, there are participants who could provide assent. And so you would leave this box and have this information filled out. Again, if it was category one to where the research subject could not provide assent, then you would delete this box out from use when you are using this template. You would just delete it out because obviously this person cannot provide assent. The last is step 5. It needs to be noted who will sign off. This is the final sign off. And so it needs to be specified by your research team, who is the person who basically needs to check to make sure all the rest of the steps were followed correctly and they sign off at the end. I hope this helps, and I hope it gives you an accurate overview of the consent template that we have provided you to help make this as seamless as possible for you through these steps. Okay, to wrap this up, remember, as principal investigators, that the buck stops with you. You need to have a clear plan and justifications for enrolling participants who can't consent for themselves. The IRB is there to review and approve these plans, but ultimately, along with the research team and the IRB, we are all responsible for protecting participants' rights and welfare. If you have any questions or need any help, please don't hesitate to contact our IRB office. You can email and also set up any appointments with me for any questions or consults. Thank you so much for all that you do and for caring about our rights and the well being of our research participants.